The Texas Longhorns will face off against the Clemson Tigers on Saturday at home in DKR in the college football playoffs. What will it take for Texas to beat Clemson and advance to the second round against Arizona State? We discuss on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by the College Football Playoffs. College Football Playoffs is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff presented by Allstate begins with four first-round games, December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. So don't miss out on the action this weekend for the college football playoffs. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, the keys to beating Clemson in the first round and once again moving on to the second round to face Arizona State. That's going to be the first and second segment of today's episode. And then in the last segment, Texas had 5 All-Americans, 2 on the first team, 3 on the second team. We give them a shout out. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I hate bye weeks so much in college football, and I'm so glad that we're now, 3 days away from this college football playoff game. Texas, who should be having a first round bye this weekend, did not get it, did not beat Georgia in the conference championship, but, they have what some would say is a decent path to the national championship game, right? Especially in the first 2 games. People feel like Texas should beat Clemson and then should beat an Arizona State team who it really is only in the playoffs because they won the Big 12, right? When you look at the field of playoff teams, Arizona State certainly doesn't look like one of the top contenders for a national championship. But obviously, it's win or go home in a playoff environment. Anything can happen. And Texas certainly, cannot play with their food. They cannot overlook their opponent this weekend. And Clemson, I think it's going to be a very tough matchup, whether it be at home or not, whether Clemson be, a 3-loss team or not. I think this is going to be a really good game, and I think it's going to be a really close matchup. Texas is favored by 12 points against the Clemson Tigers. And, I'm not telling you to go take, Clemson plus the points. I would never do that, right? This is still Locked On Longhorns at the end of the day. But I think this is crazy. I do, just personally, right? I'm not Vegas, but I think this is crazy personally. I think it's going to be a one-possession game. Whether it's a touchdown or a field goal, I think it's going to be a one-possession game. I think it's going to be a close game that's decided at the end, whether it's by a stop on defense or a score on offense. Maybe Texas is 12 points better than Clemson, and we'll find that out on Saturday. But I do think it's going to be a one-possession game. Now, I think Texas has a chance to prove that they're a real SEC team. All right. And, a lot of people said that Texas came into the SEC, but they had a soft schedule, and that's the only reason they made the championship game. When you look at this Clemson team, they did lose 3 games, right? They lost to Louisville, but their other 2 losses were to the 2 SEC teams they played. They were 0-2 against the SEC. Against Georgia in the first game of the year, they got mollywopped, right? And then they lost to their rival in South Carolina. So if Texas is a real SEC team, and you're going against a team that's 0-2 against the SEC this year, then Texas should be able to win on Saturday and make Clemson 0-3 against the SEC this season and send them home. So what are the keys to beating the Clemson Tigers on Saturday and advancing to the second round of the playoffs? I think the first one is you have to be able to contain the run. All right, I think that Cade Klubnik, Austin Westlake product, who's obviously going to be excited to come home, and should put on a good performance. I think that he'll be good on Saturday just because he's back in front of his people, his hometown, and I think that'll motivate him. And I think he's had a very solid season. I think he's a capable quarterback. I don't have anything bad to say about Cade Klubnik. My commentary comes from us having one of the best pass defenses in the country and statistically one of the best pass defenses of all time. I just don't see a scenario in which Cade Klubnik can throw the ball 35 to 40 times and take advantage of our pass defense. I've seen a lot of, national pundits and people say that they're picking Texas to win the national championship. One, because there's no just outward, national championship favorite, right? Like there's no team that's just head and shoulders above the rest. And when you look at each unit, maybe outside of Oregon's offense, Texas defense is probably the most reliable unit left in the college football playoffs, right? Probably the unit that you could count on the most week in and week out. So I just don't see a scenario in which Cade Klubnik, like I said, can come out and throw the ball 35 to 40 times and just consistently move the ball against this pass defense, right? Where Texas has been vulnerable a little bit defensively is when teams have been able to run the ball. And in their two losses against Georgia, when they've needed to, they've been able to run the ball with Trevor Etienne. And this is a Clemson team that likes to run the ball, right? And so they don't even want to come out and feature Cade Klubnik in that way. We have to make them, play with one arm behind their back and turn them into a passing team. If we allow them to run the ball like they want to, then it's going to be a very tough game for the Texas Longhorns to win. When you look at it, Cade Klubnik this year, very much a dual threat quarterback, 89 carries for 554 yards, according to Pro Football Focus. I think the numbers are different on ESPN, but I think that accounts in the sacks. Pro Football Focus, they do a good job of filtering out, what are sacks and what are actual, rushing attempts. So 89 carries for 554 yards. And then he had 26 scrambles this season for 239 yards. So whether it's designed runs, whether it's off script, him making a play when things break down, he can certainly beat you with his legs. He also had 7 touchdowns off of that. And then you look at one of the best running backs in the country that Clemson has in Phil Maffa, 1,106 rushing yards this year on 5.2 yards per carry and 8 touchdowns. So between Cade Klubnik and Phil Maffa, you're talking about 1,800 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns. This is a really good running game for Clemson. Texas has been susceptible to some running games this season. Like I said, in their 2 losses, they gave up 197 to Florida, over 100 to Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M. So that's where, this defense can be a little bit vulnerable. And Clemson wants to turn this into a time of possession, be efficient, keep the ball away from the Texas offense type of game, and run the ball and dictate things on their terms, especially in the line of scrimmage. So they want to make it a time of possession game. They weren't elite in time of possession, but they were in the top half, 48th in the country. They control the ball for about 31 minutes per game. I think if they can do that or even more and keep this Texas offense off the field, that is their best path to victory. So like I said, you have to contain the run game and turn this team into a passing team against one of the best passing defenses in the country. Second thing is, right, sticking with the Clemson side before I talk about what Texas needs to do on their side, you have to neutralize Peter Woods, right? Peter Woods was a 5-star in the 2023 class, the Arch Manning, Cedric Baxter, Anthony Hill class. Peter Woods was a 5-star in that class. Just a really, really good, talented, versatile, strong, powerful defensive lineman out of Alabama, the state of Alabama, that, went to Clemson and can play really anywhere on that defensive line and can wreck your game plan from anywhere on that defensive line. And so, obviously, Texas comes into this game with one of the best offensive lines in the country, but we have seen them in their 2 biggest matchups this year get whooped a little bit in the trenches, right? You have to be able to neutralize Peter Woods and not allow him to take over this game, because in his second year in college football, he certainly, came into his own. 82.3 overall defensive grade for the season for Pro Football Focus. He was really good this year. 74.4 pressure grade with 18 pressures on the season, right? Most of those coming from the middle of the pocket. Most of those coming from the middle of the defensive line, right, on the interior. So, like I said, Peter Woods is just an absolute animal on that defensive line, and they do a good job of moving him around and using him all over. So, according to Pro Football Focus, 153 snaps in the B gap this year. That was where he was used the most. 113 snaps outside the tackle, right? So they use him as an edge a lot. Then 32 snaps in the A gap, 39 snaps over the tackle, right? So they do a really good job of moving him around. And like I said, he can wreck your game plan, wreck any offensive play from anywhere on that defensive line. If Texas wants to win this game, Peter Woods is going to have to be neutralized, right? We've seen in the 2 Georgia games where Mykel Williams has got off, right? Jalen Walker has got off both times, right? If Peter Woods gets off in this game and can consistently harass and put pressure on Quinn Ewers, or can consistently get in the backfield and stop Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner, it's going to be a long day for Steve Sarkisian in this offense. So in terms of the Clemson side, I think those are the 2 things that we need to do at a high level to make sure that Texas wins this game. A quick word from our sponsors, and then I'll talk about what the Longhorns need to do on their side to make sure they beat Clemson and advance to play against Arizona State in the second round. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money, sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Look, I've made over $8,000 on PrizePicks myself. I can't tell you where it all went, but I have made a lot of money on PrizePicks. You can too. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with PrizePicks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money once again on PrizePicks, and PrizePicks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Join now because this holiday season, PrizePicks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas. Right? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off, or get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup to use. Once again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And today's episode also is brought to you by FanDuel, right? Get into the NFL action towards the end of the season and playoffs with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the National Football League all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. All right, now getting into the Texas side, right? I've talked about what we need to do, just the two main things in my opinion. I'm not, a super expert on the Clemson football team, but the two things that really jump out to me, right? That we need to stop their running game and, make sure Peter Woods doesn't take over the game. Now, in terms of, the Texas football side, Quinn Ewers, you cannot turn the ball over, right? I'm not sure what the game plan will be. I have my thoughts and my opinions on what the game plan needs to be. I've said it for weeks on this show. Run the ball, play elite defense, allow Quinn Ewers to complement the running game and not vice versa, right? This is not a game where you need to come out and get Quinn Ewers comfortable. This is not a game where you need to throw the ball 15 straight times, right, to show that you're capable of doing it. I think now the formula, run the ball 35 to 40 times, play elite defense, and allow Quinn Ewers to complement the running game, which he is very capable of doing. We in no way, shape, or form, unless we get down, and you have to, need to put the game and put this pressure on Quinn Ewers' shoulders. And in those scenarios, we've seen Quinn be turnover prone, right? Quinn cannot turn the ball over in this game. He does not need to win this game for us, but he damn sure is capable of losing it. And we cannot allow Quinn Ewers to lose this game for the Texas Longhorns. He has turnovers in 7 of his 11 games this year. I'm going to say that again. He has turnovers in 7 of 11 games this year that he has played in. And in the 2 biggest games, albeit both against Georgia, he has 5 turnovers combined in those 2 games and had an interception that, was literally right there in the hands, and the DB dropped it, right? So 5, almost 6 turnovers in his 2 biggest games. This is a big game, all right? Don't let the 12-point spread fool you. This is a big game. Win or go home, at home in front of your fans. This is a huge game for Quinn Ewers. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Quinn Ewers, especially if Texas does not get out to an early lead. But what Quinn Ewers cannot do, once again, is lose the game for the Texas Longhorns. He needs to, keep the ball, not turn it over, and allow Texas to be efficient on offense and keep the ball on offense. You cannot give this Clemson team extra opportunities, especially the way they play defense at times, and especially the way that they can run the ball. That could end up being the difference in Texas moving on, or Texas ending up at home wondering what happened. I think the second thing is Trey Wisner needs his 4th 100-yard game of the season. He had 100 yards against Oklahoma on over 9+ yards per carry. We beat them very easily, right? He had over 100 yards against Kentucky. We beat them very easily, right? Even though it was Probably not as bad as we should have beat him, but we beat him pretty easily. And then against Texas A&M, he had over 100 yards, and we definitely should have beat them more than 17-7, right? It felt like the 2 turnovers by Quinn, and then I think the block punt, it was just a lot at the end that, gave Texas A&M a chance. But that definitely should have been like a 30-7 type game. So I think that, like I said, run the ball and play elite defense. And I think that when Trey Wisner is at his best, this team is at its best, because I think it's just more of a philosophy and mentality thing. If you've been watching the NFL, I got Josh Jacobs on my fantasy team now in the second round of the playoffs. And it kind of reminds me of that, like where you just have that bulldozer at running back that's just getting downhill, punching people in the mouth, not avoiding contact, and just wearing on you. Right. And I think that's when Texas is at their best, when they just decide, like, we have better athletes than you. We're not going to try to trick you and get cute with all this motion, and all this trickery and all these RPOs and different things like that. Like, we're just going to line up and beat you downhill. And I think that's when they're at their best. And I think we need to see that type of performance from Trey Wisner, right? 20, 25, maybe even 30 carries if you're trying to put the game away for Trey Wisner. It all just depends on how much you want to put in Jarrett Gibson or Jaden Blue. I know there's some trust issues there. Feels like every time you feature Jaden Blue, he fumbles. Jarrett Gibson has had some of those same issues as well. So, like I said, 20 plus carries for Trey Wisner is the formula for me. Allow that offensive line to get downhill. We do have a really good pass blocking offensive line led by Kelvin Banks. I think he should be back in this game healthy. Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, that's really what they do best, right? Is pass block. But this offensive line has shown, especially in that 2-game stretch with Kentucky and Texas A&M, that they can get downhill, they can bully people, and they can move people off the spot. And I think that's what you need to do with Clemson, right? Continue to assert your will in the trenches, bully them, push them downhill, and say, this is our game, right? The offensive line needs to say, this is our game, right? We are winning this matchup today. We are moving y'all off the spot today, and Trey Wisner is going to pound y'all in the first quarter, second quarter, and third quarter. And by the fourth quarter, I bet y'all don't want to tackle him, right? And that's going to take the pressure off of Quinn Ewers, because if you're running the ball that well, even the thought, even the glimpse of putting the ball in Trey Wisner's stomach is going to have everybody come downhill. And that's when you can get those easy reads, those easy opportunities for Quinn Ewers, and you should have some people open on the back end, right? And so, I think that's the formula for success. It sounds easy, right? You still got to go out there and do it, but I think that's the formula for success for Texas. Go out and play smash mouth football, regardless of how creative and talented this offense is and how creative Steve Sarkisian is. Texas is at its best when they line up and just decide to beat people the old-fashioned way. I think the defense needs to continue to force turnovers, right? Especially in a game like this that I think is going to be played within the margins. I'm not buying that 12-point spread. I'm not buying it at all. I think this is a one-possession game. I think it's going to come down to the last drive. Once again, either somebody's going to score on offense to win the game, or somebody's going to get a key stop on defense to win the game. And so the defense needs to continue to force turnovers. They forced now, I think, either 21 or 22 straight games going back to last season with the turnover, which is just, elite. I've always talked about it. Like, regardless of the yards they allow, whatever stats they're number one in, whatever, they're elite because they force turnovers. They're elite because every game they're going to give Quinn Ewers in this offense an extra opportunity. And I think in a game that's going to come down to the margins, like I said, I think in a game that, is going to be very close and is going to really come down to the end. Sorry, Texas fans, we're going to be at the end of our seats, biting on our fingernails if you have them. I think a turnover is going to go a long way. That extra possession is going to go a long way, whether it leads to 3, or 7 for the Texas Longhorns. I think we'll look at the score at the end of the game and say, whew, we may not have won if we didn't force that 1, 2, or whatever amount of turnovers on Cade Klubnik in that Clemson offense. So I think you definitely need to force a turnover, take some pressure off of the offense, get them an easy opportunity to score, hopefully, already on Clemson's side of the field. I think in terms of wide receiver, you have to continue to feature Matthew Golden. He's emerged as your number one wide receiver. It took long enough, but I do understand that early in the season when Isaiah Bond was healthy, he was the guy. And, we just didn't do a good job of featuring everybody like we were able to do last year. But you also need to continue to feature Matthew Golden and get Isaiah Bond more involved, right? Isaiah Bond is way too talented. I know he's been injured, but he's way too talented for the lack of production that we've seen from him for, really the last month and a half of the season. And it's not just on him. right? It's on Quinn Ewers to get him the ball. It's on Steve Sarkisian to get him the ball. And I think we need to make it a point while we're running the ball to get Isaiah Bond the ball early, get him involved, and get him in space to make some explosive plays. Even if you got to hand it off to him, which we've done a couple times this year, you need to get Isaiah Bond involved. He only has 97 receiving yards in his last 4 games combined, which is, I mean, just absurd considered his talent level, right? We were talking about him as being a Biletnikoff candidate and a first round pick coming into the season. And now it's just like, where's Isaiah Bond? 25 yards a game over his last 4 games. That's abysmal, right? I mean, he's capable of going for 97 yards in this game easily, right? And so we need to get Isaiah Bond the ball, get him in space, and allow him to be a playmaker. And then Matthew Golden has 322 yards over his last 3 games. And so continue to feature Matthew Golden while also getting Isaiah Bond more involved. And I think if you're running the ball, plus you got 2 guys on the outside that are making plays, we know Gunnar Helm, like Tony likes to say, is going to bring his lunchbox and show up and clock into work. Then I think that Clemson defense, as talented as they are, will just have too much to defend on Saturday. I think Arch Manning still needs to play 10 to 15 snaps. And this is going to be a big part of the running game, right? I just think that with Arch Manning's talent level, with him being that big of a weapon, it would be neglectful for Steve Sarkisian to keep him on the bench, right? When you bring Arch Manning in, it changes the way the defense has to play. And there's so many things at your, arsenal, right? There's so many things at your disposal. He can come in and he can just hand the ball off, right? But he's going to change the numbers because people think that Arch Manning may take the ball himself. He can take the ball on the read option, right? He can fake the ball on play action or on the RPO and still have you thinking that he may run the ball, right? And then obviously he can just come in and throw it, but now maybe you're stacking the box because you're worried about the possibility of him taking off. He just changes the numbers. He changes the mindset. He changes the mentality of the opposing defense. If you put him in for 10 to 15 snaps, I really think that's a good chunk of the game where you have an advantage. We don't need to worry about Quinn Ewers' ego. We don't need to worry about Quinn Ewers being in a rhythm. This is about pulling out all the stops for Texas to win a national championship. And I think Arch Manning playing 10 to 15 snaps is the key to that. And the last thing, and I love him, so this is going to hurt. I think you need to take the ball out of Bert Auburn's hands/legs, right? However you want to say it, right? I'm not letting Bert Auburn kick anything 45 plus. Situationally, of course, if it's the end of the half or the end of the game and you need it to win, or it's 4th and long, it's 4th and 5 plus, or whatever. I mean, I might even think about it on 4th and 5, but if it's like 4th and 7, then of course kick the field goal, right? But if you're in the margins, if it's 4th and 3 and you have a 42-yard field goal, I'm going for it on offense. I'm going to win this game with our offense, right? Bert Auburn has been too shaky all year. He's making less than 70% of his field goals. You do not want to lose a close game because you rely too much on Bert Auburn, right? I am keeping the ball in our offense's hands. Like I said, obviously situationally, there's just sometimes where you have to kick a field goal and try to get points. But I'm not going to rely on Bert Auburn to win this game for me if I don't have to. Like I said, anything less than, 4th and 3 or less, I'm probably going for it. Unless it's the end of the half or the end of the game and time's about to run out, or it's 4th and long. Anything outside of that, I'm keeping the ball in our offense's hands, and I'm trying to pick up 3 to 4 yards and score touchdowns and not field goals with our field goal kicker, who once again is making less than 70% of his field goals. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we give a quick shout out to our All-Americans, right? When you're that good of a football team, number 5 seed in the college football playoffs, you probably have some of the best players in the country, and Texas had 5 of them, according to the Associated Press. We discuss after the break. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by the College Football Playoffs. It's that time of the year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show, presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into the first matchup, the Southern Methodist University SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon at Penn State. Just can't wait to see that environment on TV, especially in a playoff game. But then the marquee matchup, at least to me, the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, talking about our All-Americans, giving them some shine on Locked On Longhorns. Like I said, when you have one of the best teams in the country, you more than likely have some of the best players in the country, and Texas certainly does. On the first team, Kelvin Banks and Jahdae Barron. I mean, Kelvin Banks, from the moment he stepped in, true freshman 2022 as a left tackle, against ULM, it's whatever. But we saw it that very next week against Alabama, right? And I think in kind of a program type changing game, 20-19 against Alabama when we were 21-point dogs and really had an opportunity to win that game. Kelvin Banks really came in there and held his own against Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. He held his own, and that's when we knew we had a stud. And 3 years later, he's going to be a top 10 pick, in the NFL draft, All-American. He has just been a stalwart at that left tackle position for us for 3 years, and time flies, right? We're one of the best players in the country for college football the last 3 years, one of the best Longhorn offensive linemen we've ever seen. So congrats to him. Well-deserved. First-team All-American. Jahdae Barron, right? I mean, what a bet on yourself testimony. Probably a third or fourth round pick, maybe even later, largely labeled as a slot corner, a nickel guy. He comes back and says, I want to play on the outside. I want to prove that I can be a real corner. I don't want to say a real cornerback. Obviously, you need to play, you need guys that can play on the slot and the nickel, but I want to be able to play on the outside, right? Like, you're not going to label me as just a in the box type of player. I can play on the outside and cover some of the best receivers. And he did that. Right. He was one of the best players in the country this year and still was able to show that versatility, getting pressure on the quarterback, sacks, forced fumbles, interceptions, while not allowing a touchdown in coverage all season. So Jahdae Barron, he's definitely not getting out of the second round if he's not a first round pick this year. We'll just see how he tested the combine. That's going to play a big part in it, especially at that corner position where athleticism, is a big thing. But Jahdae Barron, certainly one of the best players in the country this year, first team All-American, well-deserved. Way to bet on yourself and come back and earn yourself millions of dollars, right? What a testimony. And then on the second team, Anthony Hill. I think we knew it from the moment he committed to Texas A&M. Like, damn, what I'm saying? I think I did an episode like, damn, why can we never get the Anthony Hill type of players, right? And you see why. 2 years into his career at the University of Texas, that man is a dog, right? Just one of the best players in the country on the defensive side of the ball. I think he's coming for all of it next year. First, team All-American, first team All-SEC Defensive Player of the Year. Anthony Hill, just the heartbeat, the quarterback, the heart and soul of this defense. He was great this year. Alfred Collins, good to see him recognized, second team All-American, because I don't think Alfred Collins made an All-SEC team. And there was just like 3 or 4 games where he just really jumped off your screen, right? Especially there was like a stretch where we played at Florida, Arkansas, and it was just like Alfred Collins was wrecking these games. I mean, T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy style. Like, Alfred Collins looked like the best player on the field, and it wasn't close. You know what I mean? So good to see him recognized as a second team All-American. He was elite this year. And then talk about a testimony. Michael Taft, from walk-on to All-American. From walk-on to All-American. I'm going to say that one more time. From walk-on to All-American, right? Won't he do it? And what a testimony. Michael Taft has just been a great player for this defense the last 2 years. Been one of the biggest reasons we've been a playoff team the last 2 years and in conference championship contention the last 2 years and been a legitimate national championship contender. He just brings so much to this defense in terms of stopping the run. He's improved so much in coverage this year, but just the grit, the leadership, the intensity that he plays with, you can tell that all 11, really all 22 feed off of what Michael Taft does on that back end. So from walk-on to All-American, it's just a testimony for sure. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I got episodes scheduled with our Locked On ACC host to give us more insight about Clemson, and then our Pro Football Focus representative Max Chadwick to come in and talk about both teams and what he expects to see on Saturday. All that coming this week leading up to the college football playoff matchup between Texas and Clemson. Hook 'em. Peace.